Hey Fergal.
Hi Daz, how's it going? Thanks for having me back.
It's good to have you back. We had you only like 5 weeks ago on the podcast to talk about stuff that was happening with AI, and you're back again because more stuff has happened.
It's been a busy 5 weeks.
It's been a busy 5 weeks and a busy 7 days. 7 days ago was Wednesday the 30th of November, and I got an email with an open invite to an open beta for a thing called ChatGPT. What happened?
What happened? So it's an interesting question. OpenAI released their most recent, I guess, machine learning system, AI system, and they released it very publicly, and it was ChatGPT. And, you know, it's pretty similar to their current offering, GPT 3.5, but it was packaged differently. You didn't need to put a credit card into it, and so I think everyone just saw that, wow, there's been a huge change in capability here recently, and it went viral, it went wild, and everyone got really excited. Around the same time, they released their most recent GPT 3.5 model, like DaVinci 003, which does a lot of the same things. Maybe it's got like slightly different, it's maybe slightly less good at saying, hey, I'm a large language model and I can't do that for you, but it's similar in terms of capability.
Okay. Let's do some quick definitions to ground everyone. Yep. OpenAI is obviously the institute that's doing a lot of work on AI and ML.
Yeah.
You said GPT. What's that stand for? Is it a thing that stands for something?
I actually don't remember. General Purpose Transformer or something like that. But
does that name mean anything? Or
yeah. So basically, I think the key piece is transformer. So there was I guess a recent breakthrough. So for a long time, people were trying to figure out, hey, what's the best way to like train neural networks that deal with text and natural language processing tasks. And it was a long time there was these like LSTMs that kind of combined short-term structure of your text with like long-term structure of your sentence, and sequence models, and everyone was working on those. And then Google published this paper, attention is all you need, and a pretty revolutionary paper with a pretty big thesis, which was like, hey, instead of like these sort of traditional sequence models, here's a new way of doing it, a new model which they called the transformer model or the transformer architecture. And it's kind of all sort of about like, hey, when you're looking at a specific word, the model will learn sort of like the other parts of the sentence that you should also look at in conjunction with that word. And you can just learn things a little bit more efficiently than with sequence models, and you can train it faster, more efficiently, you can scale it further. And so, transformers, everyone started to use transformers for all sorts of sequence data. And then I think OpenAI, one thing that they really contributed to was this idea that like, hey, you can take these transformer architectures and you can really push up the scale. You can add way more training data, way more compute to them. And perhaps very surprisingly, and I really think this is the key thing, that as you push more and more training data, they seem to exhibit qualitative changes in terms of what they can do. Right. So it's kind of like, hey, this seems to kind of understand it, or I can say, make this happier, make this sadder, which is like a very abstract concept. Where did it learn that? We didn't like give it this supervised learning where it's like, hey, let's code in a definition of sadness or happiness. It just started to learn these abstract concepts and these abstractions from masses of training data. And I think basically OpenAI and some others have just been pushing that scaling piece more and more and more. And there's other things as well. GPT 3.5, they train a little bit differently to try and align it more. But basically the big thing here is that lots of scale, lots of training data, actually kind of simple models, you can do remarkable things that 20 years ago people would have been like, well, a computer will never do this. It'll never be able to write me a sonnet, and it's like, what sort of sonnet would you like? Make the sonnet happier. And so, it's a remarkable time because a lot of things that we thought were, the domain only of human intelligence, you just need tons of training data and a big model. And,
So, and then what happened since last Wednesday was like, I guess, Twitter, and then maybe like 7 days later, like the general internet or like the media, etc., caught on to this. And I've seen all sorts of like, frankly, like outstanding uses. Now, outstanding in terms of like, I just could not imagine this is possible. So like I saw, write me instructions for copying a DVD in the style of a Taylor Swift song where she's angry because she broke up with her boyfriend or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And it actually has a go at it.
Absolutely.
And then I've seen other how do you install Intercom on an iOS app? And it actually gets that relatively correct too.
Yeah.
And it kind of everything in between. And then the other crazy thing I've seen is for any of these things, you can double back it and say, now give me that in the style of a 1940s gangster, and now say it in German, and now translate the German into Spanish, but also add in more anger or whatever. And it does all these things both immediately, as in pretty much 0-second delay.
Yeah.
And you in all cases you can kind of see what it's going for. And a lot of where one personal example I use is trying to tell your child a story before bedtime. You can kind of run out of angles. There's only so many different ways that tree dragons can go into a forest and get lost, right?
Yeah.
However, GPT-3 is actually great for giving me 10 more stories or whatever.
Yeah.
I think what I've noticed is for the longest time, the story of AI, even the story as recently as years ago, people would have been saying is it's great for specific stuff, but there's no way it can tackle creativity.
Yeah.
And is it fair to say it feels like we're actually in the inverse world here?
Yeah, I mean, there's this thing people are talking about, which is, when people were talking about AI, it was always, well, the first things that they're going to do is those rote manual tasks. And then, humans, we're going to, have all this time to go and do these, highly creative things. And we'll
go into the forest and come up with a really
make
beautiful...
art all the time, beautiful poetry. And then it's oh, wow, well, those manual tasks require really hard vision and processing things to solve, but creativity where there's no wrong answer and there's no penalty for getting it wrong. Okay, the poem isn't quite perfect, but it's okay. Or the rendered DALL-E 2 Midjourney whatever image is it might not be exactly what you had in mind, but it's still a beautiful image. You can choose one from 10.
And you can see what it's going for as well. I think that's one thing people don't realize is it's giving you back what was probably in your head because you're going to see it anyway. When I say give me instructions to open a bank account in the style of a Rage Against the Machine song, I see we're going to fight to open the account and we're going to rage all night or whatever, and I'm I can see what you're doing, but I'm not even applying an accuracy scale there. I'm just you had to go, and you're kind of giving it credit for that.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I mean, it's to what extent are we good at judging, near misses in terms of non-factual information?
Yeah.
Maybe we're just not that good at it. Maybe we don't care deeply about it. And I mean, we can get into this, and we're going to have to get into this issue of factfulness or factualness. But even when you ask it a factual question, let's say you ask it a customer support question, I asked one recently about two-factor authentication. How do you reset your Intercom two-factor authentication? And the answer I got, I was wow, that's a great answer. Yeah. And I look at it hang on, that's not how you reset your 2FA. And it's a beautiful URL. It's got the reference to our Help Center article. Yeah. That's been made up too, And even things that are factual, I think, it's people talk about humans and human brains and there's this model of system 1 and system 2. We have this intuitive part that's really good at recognizing patterns, and then we have the kind of logical, analytical, reasoning part that's slower and more precise. Yeah. And this thing seems it's very good at that sort of intuitive piece, and it's very good at fooling our intuitive piece. So when you look at it at a glance, it looks correct. Yeah. And until you really apply your slower systemic reasoning, it can be hard to see that. And so I think that sort of intuitive piece is speculating is probably what we rely on more to judge creative endeavors, art, pictures, sonnets, at least initially. And so it's very good at generating things that are plausible on first glance. But then maybe when you actually take time to think about it, you see the problems.
And I think that plausible on first glance thing is really important, because I think that's most of the people, ourselves included, who are having their minds blown, are having it blown by the idea of plausible on first glance.
Right.
As in you can, you're giving it a lot of credit for that, despite the fact that often might not have a lot of real world applicability. It's not you're never going to hang that painting in the museum, or you're never going to actually read that whatever sonnet out, or you're never going to win an award for that novel or whatever.
Sure.
And I think that the obvious direct application here, like I see a lot of folks like say content marketers are saying things like this is going to change my job forever, and I'm like, yes, but maybe not in the way that if you think your job is going to be like simply like typing in prompts and hitting tab, it's possible that your job might not exist. Yeah. And similarly, I see like managers on Twitter saying, oh, this will make performance review season so much easier, right? And I'm in all these cases, I'm like,
there's something wrong with that. Like,
well, I'm going to say, like, folks,
performance review season easier. Something's wrong with performance review season.
Exactly. Like, and I'm kind of sitting on you're all saying the quiet bit out loud here. Like, if your job actually involves you writing a lot of like spurious, BS that could be like,
why are you doing it in the first place?
What are you doing? Yeah, exactly. And like, and I get that, like, in the case of say content marketing, there might be like reasons why, like, you just need to like rank for certain words, or whatever. But like, don't mistake that with like actually the craft of actually writing or whatever.
I mean, it's possible this is a good thing. It's possible that like bullshit jobs, like things that like hey, the person doing it feels has got no value, and so like this performance review is just work. So I'm going to hand that off to GPT, and then like after a while, everyone kind of realizes that's what's happening. And the person on the other side, well, I'm going to hand that off to GPT to analyze it, and like maybe then we can have an honest conversation about like, hey, what's the kernel that's actually really valuable there, and like how do we eliminate the work?
And why are we doing all this other like performative bullshit? Like,
I mean, it's possible that the really big contribution that this tech makes to humanity is an honest conversation about like the amount of work that we can eliminate, and that could be great. That could be like massively transform potential.
That is, if we're to talk about like actual applications, like something that's on my mind is like it's not going to, like, at least my experience of it directly, and even what you said about say the 2FA use case, it's not going to directly, you can't deploy it directly today in a lot of areas where there's a definitive right answer, especially if the risk of giving the wrong answer is pretty high. So like, you don't want this thing consuming medical records and spitting out diagnoses, because I can guarantee you the diagnosis will be really well written, really believable sounding to a layperson, and with possibly like a low probability of accuracy. Now, we don't know the probability of accuracy, but it'll vary based on the inputs, I'm sure.
It would certainly scare me a lot if someone came to me and said, hey, Fergal, we want your team to start using this for medical diagnosis. It's going to be great. That would be extremely scary.
But there are other like maybe like less grave, but like equally inaccurate use cases where use it to diagnose a conclusion in a legal case. Like, I'm sure it would sound good, it would wrap it in all the right like boilerplate language or whatever, but like it would still ultimately not really know what it's saying or whatever. And I see the same, like I've asked it, like, give me ideas on how to build a modern email client to compete and win in the productivity space. And it gives something that it reads really fine, but it's only when you scratch and sniff enough, you're like, there's actually nothing here. Like, it's just nice sounding word after nice sounding word without particularly sharp opinions. That to me like makes me wonder, like, what are the like ways we could make this more applicable? Like,
so before we get into that, like, I think there's two things that I think it's helpful to tease out here. One thing is that like this tech absolutely has problems with hallucinations, is what a lot of folks call this, right? Where it doesn't know something, it just makes it up. And like, that's pernicious. And there's a lot of domains where a 1% probability of hallucination like is a deal breaker for the domain. And so like that's true, and we would all love if that probability was zero. But at the same time, also the accuracy has gone up. Like, this versus where state of the art was a year ago versus where it was 3 years ago. Like, it's absolutely better at giving you the right answer a lot of the time too. And it's dramatically better at quote unquote understanding, right? It's dramatically better. Like I struggle to say, oh, it's just doing pattern recognition, it doesn't understand anything. Or at least I struggle to say that without like, well, what do you mean by understanding? You're not having a real
what
conversation.
What is the nature of understanding?
So we're definitely on a trajectory here where, while it will still make things up, and that's a big problem, it's getting better and better at also giving you the right answer when it has the right answer. And so, what does that curve look like? It's difficult to unpack at the moment, but we're getting dramatically better models that are much better at like doing the right thing, while they still also sometimes do the catastrophically wrong thing. And so we should pay attention to both of those things. We should be like, this is very difficult to deploy in a lot of production settings at the moment, at least nakedly, at least without some cladding around it or some affordances around it. But also, it's getting much better. If you ask it something that's really well covered on Wikipedia, it's getting better. Ultimate example of this is computer programming, right? You can ask it an out-of-sample programming challenge, a programming challenge it hasn't seen, and if you ask it to generate you like a whole module or a whole system, it kind of struggles. You're sort of at breaking point. But if you ask it to write you like a function, even if you like a new made up out-of-sample one, like it might give you totally the wrong answer. But the chances of it giving you something useful have like gone way up in a way that I think is
you were saying before it basically passes our programming or like our first stage in our programming interview is like write some sort of array based question, right? And it just nails it.
So exactly. So I mean, and I haven't thoroughly searched, but as far as I know, we have a problem solving programming challenge for engineers coming in Intercom. I had to sit them myself a few years ago, and we try very hard to make sure that's like not available on the internet, and if
it's not on HackerRank or something.
And if it is, we try and like iterate and change, and we don't do that. We're not like way up to speed, so I can't guarantee it isn't out there. But this thing generated a solution that just like nailed it, and that is a senior engineer at the whiteboard for half an hour sort of problem. And it just gets it like one shot, one go.
0 seconds.
0 seconds. And that's very impressive. And I also, like half the rest of the world, I've been playing with ChatGPT or GPT 3.5 and like giving it lots of other programming competition questions or programming questions, which I'm pretty sure like out of sample. And it does a very good job. And the world knows this, like people are using Copilots, people on my team who use Copilot day to day. But that's a qualitative change in accuracy. You got to check your code. You got to make sure it's not wrong. But that's very interesting and very exciting. Very exciting as well is the idea of it's got like at least rudimentary introspection capabilities. If it writes a bug, you can be like, hey, there's a bug. Can you fix it? And sometimes it gives you a beautiful explanation of it. And like all these models are trained to do is like token prediction, predict the next few words. If you do a good job predicting the next few words, or at least traditionally, I guess it's changed a little bit in the last year, but the guts of it, the bulk of the training is just predict the next token, predict the next word. And there is something amazing happening here, which is that just doing that at scale, you get to some level of understanding. And it's a bit like, I don't want that to get lost in the wider discussion about hallucination, which is real and people didn't pay enough attention to maybe last week. But we also, there's this metaphor, I don't remember who kind of came up with it, but there's a metaphor out there on the internet of like, there's a talking dog and someone tells you they want you to go meet their new talking dog and you're like, dogs can't talk. You get to the dog and the dog has a conversation with you. And everyone starts talking about how the dog's grammar isn't very good. It's very important. Don't lose sight out of the fact the dog is talking; its grammar might be bad. Totally. And so the hallucinations thing for me is like that. This is this feels like a big change. Maybe not one we can put in production, and who knows where it'll be in a year, 2 years, 3 years. So
we'll get to it in a second. But the hallucination thing for me doesn't like render it useless at all. All it does is maybe changes the manner in which, like, I put it this way. If we assume, like, let's be like pessimistic and say, like, given a 5-paragraph description of a patient, it can give you a 70% accurate diagnosis immediately, and in most of those diagnoses questions, there's some quick test that can then verify whether or not that's true. Like, as in, sounds like you have blah. Here's the quick test for blah. Turns out I was right. Turns out I was wrong. That's still a massive like productivity step change. If we put it this way, if we assume the thing is still flawed, but to try to take the benefit of the 70% accuracy, there's possibly still things you can do that'll be massively valuable, right? Like
there probably are, and there probably are in a lot of domains. The medical thing obviously is a scary domain.
I'm not trying to advocate for like a GPT doc, but like
I have two thoughts on that. The first thought is like someone would need to study that because it is possible that, hey, this thing is net negative. That like, the new system with the human in the loop, the doctor and the artificial intelligence, has a higher probability of a catastrophic error. Because the tired, overworked doctor sometimes doesn't do their diligence when there's an appealing but incorrect system in front of them. Look, this is like the self-driving car thing, right?
Totally.
It's like, you've got to be ready to take over at any point. Like there may be areas in that regime where like the system as a whole with the human is actually worse than just
people actually overtrust.
People can overtrust and then like, what do they call it? Like not desensitization, like normalization of deviance. Like, people study this in the context of like nuclear reactor disasters and stuff. Like, what went wrong? Oh, well, we got used to this shortcut, and the shortcut wasn't always valid, etc. So that's one thing I would say. But then counterpoint, weighted against that is, when we're ever thinking about like things like medical things, is some portion of the world doesn't have access to a doctor. Right, and like maybe there's some future thing where. It's like it's the classic thing. It's like looking up medical things on the internet. It's like, well, if you can't afford, or you're in a country that doesn't have a doctor, so I don't know where
to draw that
boundary. That's a hard boundary to draw. Like eventually on the trajectory, this stuff will get, probably get good and better enough that eventually, the system as a whole does outperform whatever people currently have. And I don't know.
The other thing you were saying, just go back to the programming example for a sec. Because we'll actually have a real version of the medical conversation when we talk about customer support in a little bit, like where it's like, hey, here's an example where error tolerance is acceptable under certain conditions, etc. You were saying when it generates code, you can say, hey, that's buggy. Or another example I saw that was popular on Twitter for a while was like, talk me through your thinking line by line or whatever. Like it's almost like you're giving it, you're telling it how to think about things, or you're giving it new information and then not forcing it to like reconsider its opinion. What's happening there?
So I think there's something fascinating happening there, and like we got to talk right at the cutting edge here. And so this is speculating, and I'm a spectator. I'm not like doing this work or whatever. But so I think Google published a paper pretty recently about like how large language models can self-improve. So I think there's something fascinating there that's worth unpacking. So the first thing is that maybe about a year ago, something like that, people discovered that these models, while they would get things wrong a lot, you could prompt them with, and the classic one is, let's think step by step. So you would have a model, you could ask it like a simple maths question like, Alice and Bob have got like, 3 chocolate bars and they give 3 away to Eve or something like that, how many they have left. And, these things struggle with basic maths. And so like it would often like get things like that wrong. But you could say something like, let's think step by step. That kind of like forced it to output its reasoning step by step. Along the way. And then accuracy rates went up when you did that. Which maybe kind of makes sense. Like it's trained to, complete text. And so like step by step, well, each step, is designed to
it's almost like you're not multiplying out the probability of failure. Is in if you're going to get each step like 90% correct, then 5 steps is all of a sudden like only 50% correct or whatever.
Perhaps, possibly something like that. I mean, it's always difficult to speculate on exactly what's going on in the internals of these, but possibly something like that. But, there was a very interesting paper recently where it was like, hey, we know that we can improve the accuracy by saying, let's think step by step. And what we can do is we can get use that to get like better outputs than just have it like, I would say intuitively, instantly give the answer. You can use that to build a new training data set and like retrain the model to like improve its accuracy. So like that for me is fascinating because that's like, hey, these things can self-improve to at least some degree. I saw a demo recently, Sam Altman and OpenAI did a demo at a Microsoft event recently where he kind of showed, I guess Copilot or one of those models, maybe DaVinci, like Code DaVinci or something, I don't know. They didn't specify, but they showed it doing something like this with a Python prompt, right? Where it was like, they gave it a natural language problem, a bit like our Intercom programming problem, and then, asked the system to synthesize code, but then put the code into a Python prompt, and when it got it wrong, the system saw all of that, so it tried to execute the code, it saw it was wrong, and then took another go until it got it right. And like, could you combine that with the self-improvement thing? I think there's a very interesting world here where, language models and NLP is starting to look a bit more like the AlphaGo world where and self-play it improves. And so, I think it's very exciting times, and it's very hard to say what the limits are here. And I think there's a lot of things that people for a long time would have said in, linguistics or something like that, where they're like, well, an AI will never be able to answer these final grad schemas or something like that. These, like the tractor went down the road and turned into a field, right? Please explain what happened in that joke, And computers were bad at that historically, and the magic tractor went down the road and turned into a field, A slight modifier like that changes the meaning. It's getting really good at that in some domains. You can ask it like basic semantic questions or ask it to speculate, and it's very hard to say, up until about 2-3 years ago, whenever I saw a new machine learning system, whenever we really got into it, it always looked magical and amazing at the start. Whenever you got into it and you got underneath the hood, you're like, oh, it's just logistic regression. Or now I understand it. It's much less impressive, and it's doing something extremely basic. And I'm struggling to do that here. And maybe that's just because it's so hard to understand, but the complexity of the model. But I think these things feel like qualitatively different capabilities than we've had.
Before we get into support, which we'll deep dive on, I've seen comments saying this is as big a moment for the internet as Google. I've also seen the sort of I would say the cold water take, which is don't be fooled. Generating random song lyrics is a gimmick at best, or whatever, right? And there's obviously a spectrum of appetite, and depending on whether or not you're I guess a techno-positivist or whatever, right?
Sure.
What's your take on the Google thing? Is this A, potentially as big as Google? Is this B, a threat to Google? C, thoughts on how Google might react?
Yeah, so super speculatively here, kind of entering into total futurism and stuff. I feel that I'm a very bullish on AI, machine learning, whatever we want to call it. I feel that the change in capability that we've seen over the last kind of year, and certainly if you extrapolate forward another year or two, I personally feel that's as big as the internet. I think that's going to the potential, and we're going to have to figure out how to productize these things. There's going to have to be a ton of work done. How do you constrain them to answer from a knowledge base and so on? But I just think that the sum total of new capability that we've gotten and that we are likely to get feels to me as big as the internet. And I might be wrong, but that's where I would bet.
That's the order of magnitude. So bigger than Google.
Yeah, I think so. Now, not just ChatGPT that just came out last week, but the total progress here. It just feels like we're seeing dramatically better capabilities at reasoning, elementary reasoning and reasoning that can be wrong, but sometimes quite compelling. I would not have believed if you told me of its success on programming, challenges 5 years ago. I think most people wouldn't have believed it 10 years ago. So I think there's something big here. There's a lot of productivity that can be unlocked, and it's very hard to say where that's going to stop. And I think there's feedback loops here. I feel this is like a Sputnik moment. I think ChatGPT, you can say hey, the tech isn't that much better, or it's getting overblown, but don't underestimate the ability of low friction, being able to go in, play with something. Everyone can do that, and I think it's like a Sputnik moment, which is people who kind of look at this and go, wow, something's arriving here. I can see policy.
What's Sputnik reference here? Sorry.
Sputnik. This is back in the 50s. I don't remember when. But there was the Russians put this satellite in space that orbited the Earth and broadcast a radio signal. Right. People all around the world could suddenly tune in their radio and get this signal coming from Sputnik. And this is the narrative that's generally told. In the West, people kind of suddenly woke up and they were wow, there's a capability change here that we're not aware of, and then supposedly this caused the space race and the Apollo program and all that stuff. And so I kind of feel that maybe the reaction is still playing out, but I just see so many people who were not really paying attention to this are suddenly excited about it. Maybe that hype will die down. We're in the middle of it, so it's difficult to predict. But if this won't be it, then something else will be soon, I think.
That's all well and good. What about customer support? Obviously, Intercom is a customer support platform, and the potential that GPT chat or GPT 3.5 or any of these technologies can either make support better or faster or cheaper or more successful or more end-to-end is something that we're always all over. I know you've been thinking about this from a support point of view.
Yeah.
Earlier we talked about how how like there are environments where like an incorrect answer is like very, very, very bad, and there are environments where it's like actually quite tolerable.
Yeah.
We have like 25,000 customers across all. Some of like banks probably can't afford one. Other people would happily afford one because it means they can support all their customers faster or whatever.
Yeah.
How do you think about this technology as it applies to support, based on what you've been seeing and looking at, without giving away anything super sensitive?
Yeah. So we're obviously we try and pay a lot of attention to changes and developments in this space, and we were looking at GPT-3 like pretty early, and our initial thoughts were, hey, like the accuracy is not quite there yet. The hallucination problem is a big problem to just nakedly like say, hey, it's consumed the Intercom help center. Let's ask it questions about resetting my two-factor authentication. Just failed. And we've been looking at kind of the GPT 3.5 family of models and some other models as well recently. And, initially, so we have Resolution Bot, we have it in production. It's not using language models that are as large as maybe medium language models, embeddings and so on. And, it gets very good accuracy at the sort of thing it does, and it's designed to, the customer has to go and like curate a specific answer. We made a conscious design decision very early on that it would never say anything that hasn't been like explicitly curated by the team. And I think that works well for a lot of businesses because, hey, it might deliver the wrong answer sometimes. We try carefully control that, but it's always going to deliver you like a relevant answer or like an answer that's not going to mislead you.
Yeah, well, specifically, like I think it's the way in which it gets wrong is it might give you a wrong correct answer. If the thing it gives you will be something that somebody in your company has said, this is a correct cohesive piece of text.
Exactly.
It might not just be the right one for the question, right? Like,
and we always like we encourage our customers to always kind of like write the answer in such a way as like, to reset your account, do the following things. So that if it is delivered wrongly, at least the end user is not disoriented and they can make that judgment.
They don't go and do it for no reason.
They can go like, oh, it's a stupid bot, it gave me the wrong answer, as opposed to like, I am misled and I'm now going to like waste a bunch of time
doing something that doesn't
need to be bad. And so initially, GPT-3, we were like, oh, it's really cool, but difficult to see the kind of end-to-end usage of this. And I think that's borne out, which is that, that's been a couple of years, and, I'm not aware of anyone who has deployed GPT-3 in a total, like, end-to-end way to, like, answer the customer's question.
End-to-end meaning, like, there's no agent in the mix, right?
There's no agent in the mix, and that it's not, like, wrapped in something that, like, carefully constrains it. Like,
and because the risk there is, like, there'll be, like, kind of almost like a dark matter, like an unknown. So if someone goes to your business and asks a question that you didn't see because GPT dealt with it, gave it the wrong answer, and the customer goes off and does the wrong thing. No one actually knows what's happened there, if you know what I mean, except for the bot. And the bot doesn't even know it's wrong because it doesn't know if it's spoofing or not.
Yeah.
So you kind of end up in this potentially dangerous world, right?
Exactly. And so we've like quite carefully designed Resolution Bot to kind of like to avoid getting into any of those situations. We calibrate it, we check that, when it says something helped the customer, it did help the customer, and we've ways of like checking that between explicit and implicit customer feedback. So, but it's conservatively designed, and, at some point, the technology, these sort of like open domain question answering things, or something you could build on top of GPT 3.5, like at some point, that will get good enough that for a certain portion of our customers, that equation changes, right? Where it's like, hey, I'm not answering medically critical things, and like the inaccuracy rate has fallen. It was 90% accurate, now it's 99% accurate, now it's 99.9%. How commonly it gives you the wrong answer will eventually fall below the critical threshold, where it's like, hey, just being able to like take this out of the box is just worth it. I don't have to go and curate these answers. So that will probably come. when will that come, and is it here today? Has it come in the last like few weeks with like DaVinci 003 and ChatGPT? And that's obviously something we've been assessing, like a lot of other people. Certainly, work in progress, because you always have to go and like play with the prompts. Like you have this, when you interface with ChatGPT or GPT-3, you ask it a question, and we could take like an end user's question and then wrap it in something that says, hey, you're a very conservative customer support agent. If you don't know something and you're not completely sure, you always say, I don't know. And you reason step by step, and you're super conservative. And like maybe we can like wrap it to get the benefit of the deeper natural language understanding which these models have, and the deeper ability to synthesize and rewrite text, which can be beautiful and can be really nice. Maybe we can get those benefits and then constrain the hallucinations and the errors enough.
Is that another version of walk me through this line by line?
Is
that whole field? Is that what people call prompt engineering?
Prompt engineering, and like there's starting to be people. Like we were joking. The machine learning team in Intercom is going the prompt engineering team. We were kind of joking about that as we play with it. And but there are people out there who
at some point that laughter stops, I'm sure. Like
people out there who really sweat the prompts and gotten really good at prompt engineering. So it's a real thing. And so, it's like, it makes it difficult to say like, oh, this new tech is definitely not good enough, because what will the best prompts be like in 6 months? But that said, we don't think it's here yet. And all the prompt engineering we've done on like DaVinci in the last week or something, it's like you can get it to be more conservative. But not enough. Like the probability of giving a wrong answer and just totally making stuff up is too high. At least to use it for end users in kind of like a naked way.
That's what I was about to ask. What about we talked earlier about the doctor augmentation question. Like, is there a version of it where you can do it from like the agent augmentation?
Well, so I mean, we as you know, we believe. At Intercom, we've been thinking about this area very deeply for an extended period, and in the last few months, we have had like internal discussions about the future of the customer support inbox and about generative models, and I guess models that like generate stuff as opposed to just classify things, and we believe that their time is coming for support augmentation, and I think that seeing ChatGPT explode recently and all the excitement about it is evidence for that. It's evidence that these things are getting good. And there's a lot of things you can do in the inbox or in a context like the inbox to constrain, to kind of sound off the rougher edges of these things. So for example, an example might be to like curate the responses that it's allowed to give, and then use the generative model to like predict what should happen, but then only actually allow the suggestion thing to throw to the teammate, like a macro or like a conversational response. Hopefully provide like a beautiful interface for the teammate to make it easy for them to do that. Alternatively, to have it go and like search in your knowledge base, and there's this techniques you can use to try and apply it to that and constrain it to that, and then maybe show like this is the answer that this thing rewrote from your knowledge base, and side by side with that, here is the original source article, so that the customer support rep can like look at them side by side
and see if it adds up.
And see if it adds up.
So there's an angle like where the AI explains like its epistemological basis for how it concluded this,
how it knew what it knew.
And in that world, you're actually you don't even need, like, if you're the support rep, you don't even need to know if it's actually right. You just need to know if the logic stacks up. And in a sense, obviously it'd be better if you knew if it was right as well. But like, if it says, hey, I read the how to reset a 2FA article linked here, and I'm from that, I suggest that this is how you reset 2FA. You're probably like, that's the right article to read.
That's the right article. You might need to go, like, the problem is that when they get it wrong, they're so good at seeming right that, like,
they'll invent the idea that there was an article.
Totally. And so you might need to go beyond that. You might need to have, like, the untrusted part of the interface, which is maybe like the composer, and it pre-filled something in your composer. And there's also like a trusted part of the interface beside that, maybe just above it or something like that, that shows the original source article, shows the relevant paragraph rendered, and so you can look up both. And then the thesis is that, like, hey, that kind of quick check is better than like, because we obviously we study customer support flow very carefully and very closely, and we absolutely have some support agents where it's like, okay, got the question, they have to go and find an article themselves.
Yes.
Some expert ones, they know it, they're instantly there, they know exactly where to go. Maybe they've got a macro that does it.
Yeah.
But then maybe someone who's like newer in the company, they're still being trained in, or maybe it's only part of their job. They have to go and they've got to find the article themselves, and then they got to read it, and they got to check the answer, and then they got to copy paste it, and then they got to reformat it. And maybe there's like a multiple productivity like boost. Maybe we can make someone twice as efficient or something there by like automating that whole flow for them.
But all that agent behavior, all that agent behavior will also inform the system, right? If you put it live and like agents are forever going wrong, right, all that feeds back in, and then it gets better. Or if they're rewriting the answer to be like more accurate, I assume we can learn from that, and then like very quickly the system converges on all the right answers.
Yeah, so we certainly could build a system that does all of those things. Like GPT 3.5 won't natively do it. If you decide to build on it as a building block, and look, there's even an assessment. Is that the right system to build on? Fair. Like, its capability is very good, but it's not the only generative model in town. But whatever we build on, and we're getting really into the roadmap here, whatever we build on, potentially we would build like a learning loop. Most of our tech at the moment where we do that, we absolutely gather feedback. There are some parts of like resolution bot, like predictive answers, where it predicts things to end users, where it actually does use the user saying that helped, and say wait for the team as training signal, and like the feedback on itself. Potentially we'd end up building that. There's a lot of trade-offs. Like it's very easy to say, oh, we want a system that will like learn in production, but then it's like, okay, who has to maintain that? Who has to debug that? Sometimes it's easier to get it to like a stable state and then like lock it where it just So it depends. That's something that the team here. We do metrics and analytics, and whenever we upgrade, or we're getting into the details of our models and how we check their accuracy and calibrate them and stuff.
But what about like I know currently our inbox has this feature where like based on what you've said before, like if I jump into the inbox, it'll say but before I've said anything to try and start a conversation, it'll say like, hey, I'm Des, co-founder of Intercom, thrilled to be chatting with you, or whatever my most common thing is. That's automatically pre-written for me.
Smart replies.
Smart. I'm around saying that is just the mini version in some sense of what we're describing here. Like because we were really just going for like salutations and maybe ends and maybe handoffs, and just the kind of the common boilerplate of a support conversation should be there for you, and that alone is a productivity boost. But the idea that we could just get 1 degree more sharp and be like, somewhere in the middle of all that boilerplate is here's the meat of the answer, is like where you're talking about going, right?
Totally. And and again, there's to separate things out. There's the change in the world with like an increased capability, GPT 3.5, and then there's the stuff that like, hey, we're working on as we grind away on this problem and try and really deliver things that will make things better for our customers. And I think the capabilities have really improved, and then we're still figuring out, can we use this? Is there a shortcut to where we want to go via this? And and maybe we can use these capabilities even as building blocks. Hey, this loads of ways potentially using them as building blocks. But in terms of the the direction we were going on already anyway, there's a lot of things agents do, like greetings, where it's very obvious. Like we don't ever want to annoy people. We don't ever want to like have an agent read through a bunch of text and then be like, oh, that's useless. Intercom. Why did you do that? They go blind, and it reduces their trust in the system. It just slows them down. We want to like help them out. And so smart replies, we started out with like greetings. It was just such an obvious thing to do. We can very easily tell when you're probably going to want a greeting. You're coming to a conversation, it's a new conversation, no one said anything to the end user before. It's very obvious, and that was a low-hanging piece of fruit. People really liked the user interface, like you just press tab, boom, it's done. It's easy, it's low friction. Now, we only get to make a single suggestion there, and then there's sometimes when it's just hard for the system to tell. Maybe there's 3 different things, and people at the moment, like we have this macro flow. They use macros a lot. They got to choose which of the macros. So we're looking at stuff like, should we be suggesting those macros to people proactively? maybe it's not enough to, maybe we don't want to be pre-filling the composer. Maybe we want to like just show some macro suggestions that are contextual. There's a lot of flows that are repetitive. We've been working on things like flow finding, like trying to like understand the kind of the common steps people go through, and you know, but I mean, I guess the big message is, we do believe that this sort of generative tech, it needs to be shaped, it needs to be made good so that it's not annoying, so that it's not giving you wrong things, misleading you, certainly never pushing more work or more stress on you than you would without it. We do believe that its time is coming, and we're trying to figure out like the best ways to really make people more efficient and you know, to leverage it, to put it in a production setting that actually works for people.
Two sort of final questions. One is like, we're talking about support. What other industries do you think will see value out of this early days? It feels like support is a target-rich environment for this type of tech, but are there others? Well,
I mean, obviously, like I'm bullish on support. We're bullish on support. There's so many things that are, you know, rote. Like it's like, like the agent pretty early on recognizes that this is a problem of the following sort. This, you know, it's a reset my account or something like that.
The sort of autocomplete power is like extreme.
Yeah, there's so much structure in that area, and you know, so there's a combination of like real customer problem structure, meets like technology that's very good at like dealing with natural language, reshaping it. We can see like a button you can press to make what's in the composer more formal, right? Or like a button to make it more apologetic, right? We can see things, things like that. Other things as well. We think it's very exciting area at the moment. I don't want to go into everything totally speculatively, but you know, even before this recent thing, we were, you know, the machine learning team is kind of all in this area, and so we're big believers in support. Outside support, you know, anything where there's like structure in the task and where there's like a human approver who's able to discern whether an answer is right or wrong. This is going to seem like weird intuition, but you know, in computer science or in cryptography, we pay attention to certain types of problem where, you know, it's easy to verify an answer is correct, but hard to go and like find that answer. So problems that...
It's like P equals MP type stuff.
And complexity classes, all that sort of stuff, which is very easy to get confused about. So I'm not going to try and do that on the fly. But yeah, like, you know, people are interested in problems like that. And I can't help but think there's similar intuition here. If you have a challenge where it's pretty easy for a human to verify whether an answer is correct or not, but it's laborious for them to go and like look that up, fish that out, or it maybe in the limit case where, you know, like don't know versus don't care, you know, where the human doesn't care whether the answer is correct or not, because there is no such thing as correct. Like, it's like, write me a poem about X, Y, or like reformat this slightly.
Yeah, so that class of problem where either like validating answer is very cheap, or creating answer is very expensive, or there is no valid answer and you just actually need you just need the presence.
And that's the technology right now. The answer might be different in 6 months or in a year. I would look at the programming thing. Like, it could be that in a year that instead the answer is something more like, hey, anytime where a computer can check whether the answer is correct or not. Or it could be that like anytime the domain is sufficiently simple that the machine learning system will definitely give you, or highly likely give you the right answer. So it's an evolving thing. I think it's hard to set limits at the moment. But and you know, other industries, other domains, like, you know, like computer programming, right? Like, expert person sitting down at the terminal, they got to review the code anyway. They're able to do that, and you know, like, it is like, okay, there can be a subtle bug somewhere in your code. Sometimes it's easier to like write the code yourself than identify the subtle bug. But a lot of the times, like if you look at the workflow of a computer programmer, a lot of the time it's like, I know how to do this, but I don't remember exactly how to use this library. I'm going to Google for it. I'm going to go to Stack Overflow. I'm going to copy paste the answer, number 3 from Stack Overflow, put that back in, change it a bit or add a little bit, or maybe not supposed to copy paste directly from Stack Overflow for copyright reasons.
Sure,
probably nobody does that, but somebody might. And you know, but the idea is that like they can, you know, when you see answer number 3 in Stack Overflow, you can be like, oh yeah, that's right, that's what I want. And there's a whole workflow like that occupies a lot of programmer time. And now, Copilot comes along and does an end run around that, and then also will like reformat the code to like fit in with your existing variable names and stuff. That's extremely powerful. And we talk about like what is Copilot for customer support. Like we have like prototypes, and there's a lot you can kind of like play with there. Maybe you don't answer the full question. You just give it like the 2 or 3 word answer, and then it writes it out, and then you modify it, and you're like, make that more formal, make that longer, make that shorter. It feels like there's a lot we can do there.
And what are we shipping in January?
We're gonna have to like censor this part of the conversation.
This has been great. We'll check in I guess in 2 more weeks when the whole world's changed again.
Yeah, exactly.
But if not, it could be a few months. Thanks very much.
By the time this is up on the web, I'm sure it'll be out of date. It'll look foolish, but that's the nature of this.
That's absolutely, that's why you're working it.
That's why I work it. That's why it's exciting.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Fergal. Thanks for having me.
Cheers. Take care.